Greetings AGDxers, welcome to another video. Some of you may recall several months back I made a couple of videos called Everything You Wanted to Know About AGDx. My intention was to make a third video showcasing all the additions that have been made to the Sprite Editor, because this is probably the area that I've worked on more than any other in AGDx, and it now provides an editing system for 16:16 sprites that is quite in-depth and can even be used to create and work on sprites for other games. So let's dive right in. We press S to go into the Sprite Editor, and here you can see I'm using Nixie 2 by Andy Johns, and we have a number of sprites in here already. So let's begin by going over the basics, the ones that you know about. So you press X to create a sprite. You can press F to add a new frame. You press D to delete the sprite, although of course you can't delete image 1, so there we go, that's why that happened. So yeah, any image other than image 0 you press D to delete, and you can also press R to remove a frame. Some of the keys that have changed: we can use plus and minus on the PC keyboard now to browse through the different sprites. We also use 1 and 2 to step through a frame. You can hold that down and you can step forward, and you can also step backwards. So just to demonstrate that here, perhaps we can find a... yeah, there you go. Okay. In addition, there is a grid. You press G to view the grid. Some of you prefer this method of editing, so you can switch that on and off. Obviously use the cursor keys to move. You press space to add a pixel. Just to give you a little bit more information here, obviously you'll recognize this is the image number, this is the frame number, this is the address in memory that the sprite is stored at, and this image will be 32 bytes from this address. There are actually 4 images because it's pre-shifted an additional 3 times, so it's a total of 128 bytes if you want to get the pre-shifted images as well. This obviously is your X and Y coordinate position that you're in, and we also have a little preview pane here. Now, some of the things we can do to manipulate the image itself, we've got most of the features that you might expect. Obviously there is horizontal and vertical flip that was already in the original, but since then we have now added quite a few more. So if you press Ctrl H, I'm going to start a new image here just to show you this. If you press Ctrl H, you'll see that the H here starts to flash, and that's because I've turned on the horizontal mirror effect. So while you're drawing, you can draw in a mirror, which can make it quite easy for drawing certain types of objects and things like that, as you can see. Press Ctrl V and you'll turn on the vertical flip. I'll turn the horizontal one off, and as you can see, we're now doing a vertical mirror effect like that. And of course, if I turn both of them on like this, then we can get basically a horizontal and vertical flip like that. So it can be useful, as I said, for drawing certain objects and things like this. Okay, so we'll turn those off and we'll clear that. We'll delete the frame and we'll go back to the start. Okay. Now, if you press T, you can rotate the character like this. If you press Ctrl T, you can rotate in the opposite direction. So clockwise is T, anti-clockwise Ctrl T. Y controls the shift, and Ctrl Y controls the shift to the left. So Y for the right and to the left, and then U is up shift, and Ctrl U is a downshift. So you can move the sprite and just nudge it left or the right as you might wish to do. You can also press O, which will do an invert of the current setup in pixels. In addition to that, there are also some options, and this is only for preview of course, but if you want to know what your sprite looks like with a particular color or paper, you can press I, and this will cycle through the various colors. You can press P, and that will cycle through the various papers. And in addition, you can also press B to turn the brightness on and off. However, in addition to that, and this is mainly for use with objects, if you use Control, and this is representing symbol shift, so it could be shift on your emulator, it depends on what symbol shift is. I'm going to refer to it as Control because that's what I'm using here on the keyboard, but obviously with a real spectrum it would be symbol shift. So if you hold down Control and press I, you will color in one particular block of 8x8, because there are 4 attributes here. So if you go to a different one here, then press Control I, you can effectively color in whichever part you want. You can do the same with paper, Control P for paper, and of course, and you can do the same with bright as well. For example, there, as you can see, it's just about that one is changing. Now, as I said, this is just for previewing. As soon as you come out and go in, of course, there isn't any color data being held in the sprite. It's really just for reference while you're designing, to help you get an idea. So if you've got a game which is using a different background other than black, then obviously you can set that here, and you can see and get a feel for how the sprite looks within that design. Okay, so that's basically how that works. Now moving on to copy and paste. Most of you will know that there is, you press M or to copy or create a new sprite, and press K and it will paste it like that. But there are actually quite a few other options when it comes to copy and paste. For example, you can go to the block editor here, and if you use a standard copy of a block here, let's just say we'll pick this one like this, go to the Sprite Editor here, and if you press K, it won't work properly. That was deliberate just to show you, but if you press Control K, it will paste it only into the first 8 blocks here, right, just like that. And in fact, you can use this in combination if you want to. You can use shift, so for example I could shift over like this to here and then press Control K again like that, and then I could move it down like this, press Control K again, and then I could move it across and again like that, you see. So that basically allows you to copy blocks into the sprite in whichever position you want, and you can use that to obviously you can use that to reproduce things that you've drawn as well. So that's like it works as a block paste, but it also works as a kind of quarter paste. But you must remember that if you want to copy a quarter of a screen, a section, for example here, if I just wanted this part, I'd have to press Control M here and then Control K here, because if I press M, it's going to copy the whole thing, and obviously the byte order is different. So Control M and Control K are basically going to copy and work within this 8 pixel area here rather than the whole thing. So Control M, Control K works like a block copy and block paste, and it allows you to move sprites into blocks and vice versa. Again, as an example, if I use Control M here, I'm copying this area, but it does actually keep the rest of this here, because if I then go into the blocks and I create some blocks in here, I can do the same thing here with Control K like this, and it will actually create 4 blocks. Instead of using K as normal paste, I use Control K, and in this case, as you can see, it will actually create 4 blocks that represents a sprite, and that again can be useful if you want to replicate an image that you've created, whoops, like that, within, there you go, within the screen editor. Alright, Okay, so before we continue, I just want to add a couple of things in which I'd forgotten to mention. So if we go back to here, you'll remember I've just created this one. This was an object, but I've copied it into the Sprite Editor. And as I showed you there is a way, therefore, that you can edit 4 blocks at once as a 16 by 16 image and then copy it over to the block editor. The thing that I didn't mention, which I've just remembered, is that it will also copy the colors. So, for example, if I change the colors here using Control-I, like so, I can basically change the colors of this little sort of heart like that, and to whichever design obviously you might like, something like that, let's say. Now if I want to then use these as blocks, then I will just basically use Control-M to copy, then I press Control-K, and this will paste 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks at the end, and it will remember the colors that you used right there, so you can see. And then I can basically go to the screen editor and I can use those to draw those colors onto the screen. So the reason for that, as you can see, I mean, this is something that Andy does quite a lot to very nice effect, is he'll design some little shapes which are 2 by 2 squares, you know, like the little flowers here or whatever, and the objects and so on, and you could basically design it here in 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks and copy. And incidentally, one other thing to say about this is that if you do get a set of colors like this and you're just playing about and you want it to just go back to white, then you press Control-O, and that will basically reset all colors and clear all colors. Alright, so those are a couple of things that I didn't mention. The first one, using this for editing blocks, including the colors, which you can then copy into the block area, and secondly, you can reset the colors by pressing Control-O. So yeah, that's not the only copy and paste options that we have, though. It's actually quite extensive. I also have a thing which I call swap paste, which is, I'll show you that now. So say for example I wanted to add another frame to this image, but I wanted to add the frame, let's say, at the beginning. So let me start with this one. Say I wanted to put a frame in somewhere like here. Well, what I can do is I'll create a frame like this. Now what the swap copy does is basically when it pastes, it copies the thing that it's pasted over into the buffer. So it's a kind of a swap. Now it's useful in this sense. Let me show you here. So let's say I take this frame, I copy it, move it to this one, and now I press L, and it does a swap copy. And what that does now is the previous one, the one that's just been overwritten, is now in the buffer. So if I press it again like that, you'll see that what I've managed to do then is moved all of the frames 1 frame ahead. So it's going to save a lot of messing about, copying and pasting. And as you can see, we've got an extra frame here now, which I can edit if I want to. Like that. Okay. So yeah, just to be clear, when you press M, it's a standard copy. When you press L, it will paste whatever you've copied onto the sprite, but it will also copy what is already on the screen. So basically it's taking what is on the screen and copying it and pasting what you originally had, and that's a simple way of allowing you to move frames from one frame to another, but still keeping the old one so that you don't have to continually overwrite. I don't know about you, but I found that it was quite hassly if you decided to insert frames or try to move them around, so that was the reason I added that. Quite a simple feature. Another thing that I've added is called half paste, And so again, example, let's make a new frame like this. Oh, we can't make a new frame because we don't have enough memory. So we're in a bit of trouble now. Not to worry, let's just copy, and we'll use what we have already. So we've got an empty frame here anyway. So in this case, half paste, you press comma, which is next to M. So the reason I chose comma, very few keys left to choose, but basically you've got K and M, and L and comma on your keyboard are right next to them. So L is a swap paste, and if you press comma, it's a half paste. And when you press comma, as you'll see, it only copies the top 8 frames here. Now that can be useful, as you might imagine, for if you want to create some kind of animation, say running animation or something like this, and you just want to keep the top half. And obviously, if you want to keep the bottom half, excuse me, if you want to keep the bottom half, you can do that as well, because you just press shift like this, and then copy, and then you can press comma, and it will only copy the bottom half, and then you can just bring it down just like that. And of course, you can also mix up various different types of copy and paste to get the effects that you want. And in addition to that, we also have another type of paste, which uses Boolean logic. So this is a little bit more advanced, but if I was to, I'm just turning on the reflect there just to get a circle effect. So if I take a copy of that circle, and let's say here, if I press Control C, this will do, well, Control X I think it is, will do an OR paste, which will basically paste the circle that I've drawn over the top of the current sprite like that. And if I press Control C, it will do an XOR paste, which is like it works in a similar way to the way AGD prints sprites on screen. And again, that can be used if you want to create something that's printed over some blocks. If you want an object that is appearing, that it wants to appear in front of some blocks, you can kind of play about with that. You need to kind of understand a little bit about the way that the Boolean logic works with AND, OR, and XOR, the way that the pixels overlap. But those of you that know that will understand what that means, and I'm sure there's plenty of stuff on the internet you can read up on if you're interested in doing that. It was just an experiment that I added, and not something that most people will necessarily need, I don't think. Alright, so that is pretty much most of the features, I think, other than, of course, to show you that there is also this sprite sheet here. So normally when you start, this will be a blank screen, and you would press S, and it will basically create a sprite sheet for you of all the sprites and indeed all the objects that exist within the game. This allows you to then you can save this off as a screenshot. You can also move around and press M here, and it will copy whatever you've pointed at. And in addition to that, you can also press space, and it will jump to the image. If it can find it, it will jump to that image so that you can edit it like this. So that's pressing the space bar. So you can look at your sprite sheet here and say, oh yes, I need to edit this one. Press space, and there you go, just like that. In addition, you can press L as before to load from tape. There is also an attribute grid, so you can load an image in. We'll come to that in a moment, but you can press A, and that will switch on an attribute grid, and this enables you to see the pixels. There is a video I've done about the sprite sheet, but you can also, as well as loading in from tape, you can also load from binary. Now, to load from binary, you would load in at address 49152 whilst you're in the Sprite Editor. So when you're whilst you're in the Scratchpad. So you're in the Scratchpad here, you would load a binary in at 49152, and then you would press R, and R will basically refresh the screen that you've got stored. The reason for this, it's actually held in a different bank, And while we're in this mode right here, we are actually outside of the game, and we're looking at a different bank within 1 to 8K. So you can effectively load your screen, as you can see it, into address 49152, refresh it, and you will see it. You can also, for example, save a screen from a game, any game you want, save it as a binary from 16384 6912 bytes, and then you can load it into AGD here at address 49152, press refresh, and any screen from any game on the spectrum will then appear in this section of AGD, and you can then obviously copy and paste any graphic that you want from there, just like that. Okay, so I think that is pretty much it. There is a manual with all the different keys available, but I hope that you found that useful, and it might have just, you know, given you an overview to some of the things that you can do that you might say, oh, I didn't know I could do that, and then you can have a little play, because obviously the best way to learn is by actually doing it and trying it out. So I hope you found that useful, and keep enjoying the Spectrum, and as always, happy coding. Thanks a lot. Bye bye. This video would not be possible without the amazing contributions from the people whose names you can see scrolling up the screen right now. If you'd like to be one of them, you can get all my games for free, you can get some coding tips, you can even get to dictate which games I work on in the future, and you might even feature in them. So if that sounds good to you, then head over to the Patreon page. The link is just coming up now, and in the meantime, happy coding. Bye bye.